The silence that followed the Vorthan withdrawal was heavier than any alarm. On Mars, in the Titan habitats, in the hidden Oort cloud bases, people waited. They tended to the refugees, repaired ships, and watched the stars, expecting the flash of a Council armada arriving to enforce order. The Galactic Council did not send a fleet. They sent a summons, not for Min-Su alone, but for a delegation to be sent to a neutral station. The message was cold, simple, and gave no hint of their judgment. Min-Su, Yuna, and Jay stood in the docking bay of the neutral station, a stark, functional place called Nexus 7. With them was Tova, whose strength had slowly returned, and a representative from each of the refugee groups. A sturdy Fidex named Gore, whose skin was like polished basalt, and a graceful Millennian named El, whose form swayed like a sapling in a gentle breeze. They were a strange, mismatched group, a picture of the very instability the Council feared. The chamber they were led to was not the grand amphitheater of Elysian Prime. It was a circular room, plain and gray. In it stood Presider Vel and a handful of senior council members, including the Vorthan commander from the encounter. There were no crowds, no spectacle. This was to be a private verdict, an execution of ambition, perhaps. You have deliberately violated Galactic Edict, Vel began, its voice as impassive as ever. You have harbored proscribed biologicals, compromised quarantine security, and employed emotional manipulation against a Council vessel. The prescribed response is punitive sanction, the forcible return of the refugees to Council custody, and the permanent installation of a Vorthan oversight garrison in your star system. Min-Su felt the words like physical blows, but he stood straight. Before he could speak, Yuna stepped forward half a step. With respect, Presider, she said, her voice clear in the quiet room. We have violated an order, but we have upheld a principle older than any of our species, that a being in need deserves aid. You denied us membership for being fragile and volatile. Is compassion a volatility you wish to purge from the cosmos? The Vorthan commander stirred. Compassion is an unreliable variable. It leads to illogical risks, the protection of the inefficient. It weakens the whole. Then the Millennian, El, spoke. Its voice was like rustling leaves, translated by a small device on its person. The strong blade believes the plow is weak, for it does not cut. But the plow feeds worlds. You see inefficiency. We see a different function. Gore, the Fidex, thumped a heavy fist softly against his own chest, a sound like two stones knocking. My people shaped asteroids for generations. Your machines now do it. You called us redundant. But your machines do not understand the song of the rock, the stress points, the hidden veins. You lost knowledge for efficiency. That is not strength. That is forgetfulness. Tova simply looked at the Vorthan commander. No telepathic broadcast came, just a quiet, steady gaze. The commander looked away first, a minute flicker of its eyes. Presider Vel observed this, not just the words, but the way this odd group stood together. The human, the Lurian, the Fidex, the Millennian. A mosaic of the rejected. Your alliance is one of desperation, not design, Vel stated. Strongest alloys are made of different metals, Jay said, speaking for the first time. Her commander's tone was factual. Each compensates for the other's weakness. Alone, they are just pieces. Together, they can hold up a sky. Min-Su saw a flicker, not in Vel, but in a Sheen counselor, whose crystalline facets shimmered with a slow, thoughtful light. He took his chance. You refused us, Presider, Min-Su said, his voice calm but filling the room. You told us we did not belong, so we looked for others who did not belong. We found not weakness, but perspective. Not fragility, but resilience of a different kind. We are not asking to join your house. We are showing you we have started building our own. and the door is open. He let the words hang. This was not a plea for inclusion. It was a declaration of independence. A quieter, gentler one, built on sanctuary, not conquest. The council members conferred silently, a swift exchange of data and glances humans could not interpret. Minutes ticked by, an eternity in the gray room. Finally, Vel turned back. The Galactic Council cannot endorse your actions. They remain, in a legal sense, a violation. It paused, and the pause was new, uncertain. However, the consensus is that forcible intervention at this time would be disproportionately destabilizing. It was not an approval. It was a standstill, a cosmic shrug. The refugees? Una pressed, her voice tight. They are your responsibility, the Vorthan commander said, the words seeming to taste bitter. Their fate is tied to yours. The Council will not recognize their species' claims, but it will withhold punitive action regarding their current location. For now, it was the best they would get. A reluctant, grumbling tolerance, a refusal to help, but an agreement not to destroy. It was the soil in which something new could grow, not because the galaxy approved, but because it chose to look away. The journey back to Mars was quiet, but the quiet was different. It was not the silence of despair, but of processing, of a weight lifting, leaving them lightheaded. Weeks later, Minsu and Una stood in the main observation dome of Armstrong Station. Below, the red planet turned. But on the main screen, the view was of a ship. It was not a human design, nor purely Lurian or Fidex or Millennian. It was a hybrid. The hull was human titanium alloy, braced with Fidex woven stone supports. The life support systems were a blend of human engineering and Millennian organic air purifiers. The communal spaces were designed with Lurian needs for quiet reflection in mind. It was the first vessel of the Allied Sanctuary Network. Its name was etched on the hull in several scripts. The Welcome. On its bridge was a mixed crew. Day was at the engineering station. A Fidex co-pilot sat beside a human navigator. In a specially cushioned alcove, Tova would serve as a communications link, not through forced telepathy, but through chosen connection. The ship was not a warship. It was a scout, a diplomat, a lifeline. Its mission was not to conquer or claim, but to find, to help, and to offer a place. It was everything the Council was not. As the countdown finished, the Welcome's engines glowed blue. It slipped from its dock, moving gracefully, a testament to what could be built from pieces everyone else had thrown away. Una watched it go, a small, tired smile on her face. They said we were volatile, that we'd be a risk. Minsu nodded, watching the ship shrink to a star-like point. They were right. We are a risk to coldness, a risk to indifference. He put a hand on the cool transparisteel. The galaxy refused us. It judged us and found us lacking. So we opened our arms to others it had thrown aside. And in doing that, we didn't just find allies. We found out who we really are. On the screen, the Welcome made the jump to faster-than-light travel. It didn't vanish in a violent flash of light, but in a soft, rippling wave, like a stone dropped into a still pond. The effect was Millennian, a gentler way of folding space. The point of light was gone. The silence in the dome was deep and peaceful. They had not won a war. They had not been accepted. They had simply chosen, and in that choice had built a new corner of the universe. It was small, and it was fragile, but it was theirs, and it was open. And for now, as the stars wheeled silently outside, that was more than enough. The fifth trip of the freighter Endeavor was the one that broke the silence. It was not the ship's fault. Captain Day, the engineer who had written the masking software, was piloting it himself now, his hands steady on the controls. The refugees, a mix of Lurian families and 2 weary Fidex engineers, were already secure in the carefully padded hold. The detour had been made, the transfer successful. They were on the quiet coast home, but a Vorthan long-range patrol vessel, the Judgment of Clarity, was running a routine sweep of the sector. Its sensors were not looking for refugee ships. They were calibrated for weapons signatures, for drive emissions from warships, for the large, logical movements of council members. The Endeavor was a ghost in its own software, a tiny, cold blot moving just outside approved lanes. To the Vorthan AI, it was an anomaly, a piece of illogical data, and the Vorthan hated illogical data. A single powerful scan pulse washed over the Endeavor. It was not a communication. It was an interrogation. The pulse stripped away Day's clever software like tissue paper, revealing the true course, the hidden life signs in the hold, the residue of non-human biologicals. On Mars, in Project Welcome's tiny control nook, alarm screamed. Yuna stared at the screen as the Judgment of Clarity's icon moved, fast and purposeful, to intercept the blip that was the Endeavor. "They've been made," she said, her voice flat with dread. She opened a channel. "Day, abort, run. They're on you." Day's voice was tight. "Running just paints a brighter target. Hold on." They heard him speak, not to them, but over an open frequency. "Vorthan vessel, this is the human freighter Endeavor on a humanitarian mission. We have non-combatants aboard. Request safe passage." The reply was instant, a voice like grinding stones. "Human vessel Endeavor, you are in violation of Galactic Council Quarantine Edict 7. You are harboring prescribed biologicals. Cut your drives. Prepare to be boarded and your cargo confiscated." "They're not cargo," Day shot back, a heat in his voice he couldn't suppress. "Your emotional distortion is noted. Comply or be disabled." The Judgment of Clarity powered up its tractors and its low-yield disruptors, weapons meant to subdue, not destroy. They were going to take the ship, take the people inside, and recycle them. Minsu arrived in the control nook, his face pale. Jay was right behind him, already barking orders to the Mars defense grid to go to standby. A futile gesture against a Vorthan warship. "We can't fight them," Jay said, the truth bitter. "One ship would level every station we have." Minsu watched the screen, the two blips converging. He thought of the families in the hold, who had risked everything for a whisper of safety. He thought of the council chamber, of being told his species was too volatile, too fragile. A cold, hard resolve settled in his stomach. Sometimes fragility was just another word for having something to lose. "Open a channel," he said to Yuna. "To the Vorthan. Wide beam. Put me on." "Minsu, what are you doing?" Yuna asked, her fingers hovering over the controls. "The only thing we have left," he said. "Talking." The channel hissed open. "Vorthan Commander, this is Ambassador Kim Minsu of Seoul. The Endeavor is under my authority. I am formally requesting asylum for the beings aboard, under the principles of compassionate sanctuary." A pause. Then the grinding voice returned, tinged with what might have been amusement. "Ambassador, your authority is not recognized. Your principles are biological flaws. There is no asylum from the Council's order. This is your final warning. Stand aside." On the Endeavor, they saw the Vorthan ship's tractor beams glowing to life. He made a decision. He threw the ship into a hard emergency burn not toward Mars, but away, leading the Vorthan on a chase, buying seconds. The lumbering freighter shuddered in protest. On Mars, Jay saw it. He's leading them away from the populated zones. The fool. They'll rip him apart. It was then that Tova, who had been standing silently in the doorway, stepped forward. Its large eyes were fixed on the screen, on the symbols of the pursuing Vorthan ship. It had been learning human communication, but now it reached for something deeper, something innate, They see only the law, Tova's voice whispered in Minsu's mind. They do not see the why. We must show them the why. How? Minsu asked aloud, desperate. You gave me shelter. Hannah gave me medicine. Day is risking his life. Yuna works until she falls asleep at her screen. These are not laws. These are moments, feelings. We Lurians. We are not strong. But we remember. We share. Tova closed its eyes. A faint, silvery light seemed to gather around it. Not a physical light, but one that strained the eyes of everyone in the room. It reached out, not with a broadcast, but with a focused telepathic surge, aimed at the Vorthen ship, but using the open human com channel as a carrier wave. And then the galaxy saw. Not words. Not arguments, sensations, memories. The Vorthen commander, its hand raised to order the Endeavor's disablement, was suddenly somewhere else. It felt the cool, gentle touch of Dr. Hana's scanner on its fur. It saw, through Tova's eyes, the human doctor's face, not with clinical detachment, but with focused, determined kindness. It felt the profound, shaking relief of being safe that it experienced Day's late night in his workshop, the frustration, and then the triumph of crafting a tool not for profit, but for salvation. It felt the bone-deep exhaustion in Yuna's shoulders as she coordinated supply lines, and the sharp, sweet joy when a shipment of child-sized environment suits arrived from a donor on Earth. It saw. In a flood of interconnected memories from 100 different refugees, the moments of human compassion, a young human volunteer crying as she fed a malnourished Melanian child, a gruff Martian engineer teaching a Fidax how to patch a hull with human tools, their hands speaking a language of shared work. Minsu, kneeling in a dim corridor, placing himself between a bully and the weak. It was a torrent, a hurricane of feeling, of fragility tending to fragility, of weakness offering shelter to weakness. It was illogical. It was inefficient. It was chaos. On the bridge of the judgment of clarity, the commander staggered. Its logical mind, a fortress of cold equations, was flooded with raw, undiluted empathy. It did not just understand the humans were helping. It felt why. It felt the value those refugees placed on a single act of kindness. It felt the human defiance, not as rebellion, but as protection. For a species that valued emotional control above all, it was a psychic scream of everything they suppressed. The Vorthen weapon systems went offline. The tractor beams flickered and died. Across the solar system, and bleeding into nearby council space via the open channel, the broadcast echoed. Not every species was telepathic, but Tova's sending was pure emotion, a universal language of fear, hope, and gratitude. Council members watched their monitors in stunned silence. They saw the stark, shameful contrast, their own edicts of rejection, and the messy, beautiful, defiant network of aid it had provoked. The Endeavor, its engines overheating, drifted. They waited for the blow that did not come. On Mars, the control room was silent. Tova slumped, exhausted, caught by Yuna. The sending was over. The cum crackled. It was the Vorthen commander's voice again, but the grinding certainty was gone. It sounded strained, confused, as if speaking through a great pain. Your actions are without precedent. This emotional broadcast is a contamination. Minsu stepped to the console, his own heart pounding. It is the truth you refused to see, Commander. You judged us for our fragility. This is what we do with it. We protect other fragile things. That is our strength. Will you fire on that? A long, static-filled silence stretched across space. The entire human system, and likely parts of the council, held its breath. Finally, the voice returned, quieter now. The judgment of clarity is withdrawing to report this. Anomaly. Do not interpret this as permission. The council will decide. The warship's icon on the screen turned, its powerful engines flaring as it moved away from the Endeavor, away from Mars, back toward the stars. The immediate threat was over. But a greater one now loomed. They had not just broken a law. They had shown the galaxy the beating, vulnerable heart behind the act. They had forced the logical, orderly council to look directly into the illogical chaos of compassion. The storm was no longer on the horizon. It was here. And humanity, surrounded by the refugees it had sworn to protect, stood waiting for its judgment. The news of Tova's arrival did not stay in Bay 3 for long. It was a secret too big, a truth too bright to hide. On Earth, screens showed the Council's cold rejection one moment, and the next, grainy, leaked footage of a small, fur-covered being helped from a battered pod by human medics. The contrast was electric. It sparked something in the quiet office of the Martian station commander. The reality was less spark and more a grinding dilemma. Min-Su and Yuna stood before her desk, Tova resting in a nearby medical suite. "You understand what you are asking," Jay said, her voice low. She pulled up a star chart. A flick of her finger highlighted the asteroid belt, and then a specific dense cluster in its outer reaches. "This is where Tova says the others are hiding. It's 6 days hard burn from here in our fastest civilian runners. And it's well outside our permitted traffic zone. The moment we send a ship out that far, the Council monitoring satellites will see it. They will ask questions we cannot answer with a polite lie. Then we don't use our fast ships," Yuna said. She leaned over the desk, her finger tracing a different path. "We use the old Galilei-class freighters. The ones we use to haul ice from the belt to the Ceres hydroponics farms. They're slow. Their transponders ping routine traffic data. We send one out on its normal route. But it makes a small, unscheduled detour. A detour to pick up illegal refugees," Jay finished, her expression unreadable. "Sanctuary seekers," Min-Su corrected softly. He had been quiet, watching the chart. "Tova showed me more. The Melanians, they are master growers, bioengineers. Their world was reassigned for agricultural production by the Vorthan conglomerates. The Fidax are tactile engineers. They understand materials in a way we don't. They were declared redundant when their home asteroid mines were automated. They are not criminals. They are the leftovers of the Council's efficiency. And housing these leftovers will be seen as an act of war," Jay said, finally looking up at him. "My duty is to protect this station and the people on it, not to start a war we cannot win over principles." The room fell silent. The hum of the station's ventilation was the only sound. Then a new voice, thin and clear, spoke in their minds. "It is not war." They all turned. Tova stood at the door, supported by Dr. Hana. The Lurian looked frail, but its eyes were clear. "It is shelter. The strong do not see it coming, because they cannot imagine giving something for nothing. It is, to their logic, a void. A miscalculation." Min-Su felt the truth of it. The Council's rejection was based on a calculation of risk and utility. Compassion had no quantitative value in their equations. Acting on it would be invisible to them, right up until the moment it wasn't. "We don't have to make it a government action," Yuna said, an idea visibly crystallizing. "Tova's story's already on the nets. People are talking. What if it's not a military or diplomatic operation? What if it's a civilian one?" It began slowly, in the way avalanches begin. A software engineer on Luna, named Day, saw the leaked feed. He was a man who loved puzzles and hated waste. He looked at the specs for the Galilei-class freighters. He wrote a patch, a clever little piece of code that could make a ship's transponder show a steady, boring course while its actual navigation took a small, quiet detour. He posted it online, tagged for the Mars engineering forums. "For independent haulers," the description read. privacy options. A doctor on Earth, Hannah, watched the same feed. She saw the way Tova flinched at sudden movements, the signs of malnutrition and stress. She organized a network of medical volunteers, trauma specialists, xenobiologists, nutritionists. They began compiling data packs: how to treat common Fidex mineral deficiencies, calming techniques for telepathic species, Nilanian dietary needs. These packets were encrypted and uploaded to anonymous servers. Humanitarian aid protocols, the file header stated. On Mars, Jay watched the civilian networks mobilize. She made her decision. She did not send official ships. Instead, she quietly authorized the loan of 4 decommissioned Galilei freighters from a Mars-based shipping cooperative. The paperwork was lost in a backlog. She looked the other way when teams of volunteers, coordinated by Yuna's meticulous planning, worked through the night to retrofit the empty cargo holds with makeshift life support partitions. Air scrubbers and water recyclers. Min-Soo worked the diplomatic shadows. He sent carefully worded messages to the council, asking for clarification on quarantine boundaries, protesting unclear sensor readings near Mars. It was a dance of bureaucratic fog meant to create noise and buy time. He felt like he was planting weeds in a perfectly manicured lawn, hoping they would grow before anyone noticed. The first ship, the Gulliver, launched on a routine ice haul mission. Its captain was a retired belt miner with a face like weathered rock and a heart that hated bullies. In its hold, instead of empty cargo containers, were supplies donated from 100 different sources. Blankets from a textile mill in Seoul, nutritional paste from a factory in Jakarta, medical kits from Oslo, and Day's software patch hung in its navigation computer. Yuna monitored everything from a cramped corner of the station's traffic control, a section she had unofficially dubbed Project Welcome. She watched the Gulliver's blip move into the belt, its transponder singing a song of normalcy. Then, at the predetermined coordinate, it flickered. To any watching Council AI, it would seem like a minor sensor ghost, a blip of solar interference. The ship went silent, running on passives only, as it coasted into the dark, rocky maze of the outer belt. Hours passed. Yuna did not move. Min-Soo brought her coffee, saying nothing. Then, a burst of tight-beam lasercom, encrypted and aimed only at their receiver. The captain's voice, rough with emotion. "We have visual. Gods above. It's a junkyard of hope." He described the hidden enclave, a Millennium generation ship with great fungal gardens glowing softly in its viewports, clinging to a giant asteroid. 2 Fidex mineral skiffs, their hulls patched with strange, woven metals, and smaller pods, like Tova's, tucked into crevices. They're signaling. They're scared. Sending the all-clear. The transfer was slow, delicate. Shuttlecraft from the hidden ships, barely spaceworthy, ferried small groups to the Gulliver. The images, sent via heavily encrypted data packets, showed it all. A human engineer in a patched-up suit carefully helping a stoic, rock-skinned Fidex navigate the airlock. A Millennium, its body like a graceful tree root cluster, being gently guided to a cot, its leafy appendages brushing the hand of a human medic in thanks. A group of Lyrian children, their large eyes wide, being wrapped in bright human-made blankets. It was not sleek. It was not official. It was messy and desperate and beautiful. The Gulliver returned to Mars, its hold now full of silent, trembling life. It docked at a secondary, rarely used agricultural dome. Dr. Hannah and her team were waiting. There were no cameras, no announcements. But the truth, once again, seeped out. A nurse posted a picture of a Fidex child, its stony hand holding a cartoon-decorated bandage. A volunteer spoke of the haunting, grateful songs the Millennians HUMMED back in her office, Jay looked at the reports. She looked at the faces of the refugees being quietly settled in the Titan habitat, in the hollowed-out asteroids of the Oort cloud prepared by other volunteer crews. She looked at Min-Su, who was exhausted but had lost the hollow look from the council chamber. "We are breaking galactic law," Jay stated. "We are keeping a promise," Min-Su replied. Jay nodded slowly. The first ship had succeeded, but the danger was now real. The hidden enclave was bigger than Tova knew. Hundreds more waited, and every trip was a gamble. The council's eyes were not blind, just indifferent. But if they ever stopped looking past the weak and the small, and focused on the strange, compassionate activity in the Sol system, the storm would come. For now, however, in the quiet dark between the stars, humanity was no longer just a rejected species in a cage. It had become a door, and the door was open, letting in the faint, hopeful light from the forgotten corners of the galaxy. The silence on the shuttle back to the Mars transfer station was a heavy, living thing. Min-Su spent the long journey staring at the reports on his data slate, the words blurring into a gray mess of bureaucratic failure. Yuna was restless, moving between her seat and the small observation port, her jaw tight. The stars slid past, indifferent. The Galactic Council's verdict was final. Humanity was to be left alone, a curious but flawed specimen in its own tiny jar of space. Mars, when they finally docked at the orbital station Armstrong, was a bustle of familiar human activity. It was a comfort and a sting. Here was their achievement domes glowing like pearls on the rust-colored surface, traceries of shuttle traffic, the hum of industry. But it was also their cage, the furthest outpost they were now permitted to expand. The station commander, a steady woman named Jay, met them at the airlock. Her face, usually calm, was grim. "The news traveled faster than you did," Jay said, her voice low. "It's all over the nets. Galaxy says no. People are angry, scared." Min-Su handed his travel case to a waiting aide. "We need to prepare a formal address. Frame this not as an end, but as a period of consolidation." Yuna snorted softly, a rare break in her professional composure. "Consolidation? They've put a fence around the solar system, Min-Su. We've been told to sit in the corner." Before Min-Su could reply, a sharp alarm pinged through the station's comm system. It wasn't emergency red, but a priority yellow traffic alert. Jay touched her earpiece, listening. "Control says there's an anomaly. A small object on a slow drift from the asteroid belt. No transponder, no drive signature. It's just coasting toward us." A flicker of cold dread went through Min-Su. Had the council decided to enforce its quarantine so immediately? Was this a probe? A warning shot? "Put it on screen," Jay ordered. In the command center, a main display flickered to life. Against the black, the object was a dark, lumpy shape, barely more than a speck. It was tiny, maybe the size of a ground car. Thermal showed only the faintest residual heat, like a stone cooling in the sun after a brief day. It was not a warship. It looked for all the world like junk. "It's on a direct intercept with our high-orbit logistics lane," a sensor operator said. "Trajectory suggests it was nudged, not launched." "A piece of debris?" Yuna asked. "From where?" Belt miners tagged their scrap. "This is clean," Jay murmured. "We should vaporize it. It's a navigational hazard." "Wait," Min-Su said. The memory of the Lurian's wide, dark eyes in that dim corridor flashed in his mind. A feeling illogical and strong settled over him. "Can we catch it? Bring it into Bay 3? It's isolated." Jay looked at him as if he were mad. "You want to bring unidentified, possibly council-related hardware onto my station?" "I want to know what it is," Min-Su said, his voice firmer now. "If it's a warning, we should read it. If it's trash, We dispose of it. But we look first. Jay held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a sharp nod. Fine, but Bay 3 is sealed. Full quarantine protocols. No one in or out without my say-so. The operation was quiet and efficient. A small utility tug, piloted by a calm veteran named Day, was dispatched. With gentle puffs of its thrusters, it matched the object's slow tumble and enveloped it in a capture net. Day's voice crackled over the comm. It's not military. No visible weapon ports. Hull composition is strange, pitted. Looks like it's been through a lot. In the sterile, brightly lit isolation of Bay 3, the object seemed even smaller and more pathetic. It was a pod, its surface scarred by micrometeorites and heat scoring. There was a simple manual hatch. The station's medical officer, Dr. Hanna, stood by in a biosuit, scanner in hand. Min-Soo and Yuna watched from the other side of a thick, transparent wall. Atmospheric reading from inside is stable, Hanna reported, her voice filtered through the comm. Breathable mix. Low levels of biological signs. One life form. Weak but steady. Open it, Min-Soo said. With a hydraulic whine, a team in full containment gear attached clamps to the hatch. There was a hiss of equalizing pressure, and the door swung open. A wisp of vapor escaped. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a slender three-fingered hand, covered in fine, matted fawn-colored fur, gripped the edge of the hatch. A figure unfolded itself with painful slowness. It was the Lurian from the corridor. Its large eyes were half-lidded with exhaustion and fear, blinking against the bright lights. It wore the same simple gray tunic, now stained and torn. It took a wobbling step out of the pod, and then sank to its knees on the cold bay deck, as if its strength was utterly spent. Hanna stepped forward, scanner humming. No pathogens. It's just exhausted, dehydrated. Min-Soo didn't wait. He ignored the protocol, walking to the airlock door and cycling it open before Jay could stop him. He stepped into the bay, the others watching with held breath. He approached slowly, then knelt a few feet from the shivering alien. The Lurian looked up. Recognition flashed in those deep, dark eyes. It made a soft, warbling sound. Then a voice filled Min-Soo's head. It was not in his ears, but in his mind, a clear, tired, and profoundly sad voice. You helped. In the corridor of cold minds. You helped. Telepathy. The reports mentioned Lurians were empathic, but this was direct, clear communication. Min-Soo fought the instinct to recoil. He kept his voice gentle. You are safe here. What is your name? I am Tova. The mental voice was like a whisper of wind through leaves. I was of the Lurian enclave on Lyra Station. They took it. The Vorthan and the Crix. They said we were inefficient, that our emotional resonance disturbed the trade algorithms. Tova's mind projected images, not words, but feelings in flashes. A peaceful, garden-like habitat shattered by armored figures. Lurians being herded onto barren transports. The cold, disdainful gaze of a Vorthan overseer. We are scattered. My family, I do not know. I hid in this old maintenance pod. I remembered your face. Your kindness. It was a quiet place in the noise of hate. I programmed the pod with the last coordinates I sensed from you. It was a very long shot. You came all this way, alone in that? Yuna asked, having entered the bay behind Min-Soo. Her voice was full of awe, not fear. Tova nodded weakly. Where else is there to go? The Council's peace does not protect the weak. It only protects the strong from being inconvenienced by the weak. The thought carried a weight of galactic history, of countless small species ground under the march of logical progress. Dr. Hanna moved forward with a medical kit. offering a hydration pack. Tova flinched at first, then, sensing Hana's intent, accepted it with trembling hands. "You said we are scattered?" Minsu said quietly. "Are there more of you? Out there?" Tova's large eyes met his. A new flood of images came, this time from a different point in space, the asteroid belt. Not the mined rocks near Mars, but the darker, colder reaches farther out. Images of other ships, not Lurian, but different shapes, all hiding. A squat, sturdy vessel with Melanian markings. A sleek, damaged Fidax scout. All silent, all dark, hiding from patrols. There are others like us, Tova sent. A wave of profound loneliness accompanying the thought. Species the Council discards. We hide in the blind spots. But the blind spots are growing smaller. They will find us, and they will recycle our ships for materials and leave us on barren rocks to forget how to breathe. A pause, and then a thought so fragile it almost broke. I came because you were the only ones who saw me. Not a problem. Not a weak thing, just a being in a corridor who was afraid. The bay was utterly silent except for the hum of the station systems. Minsu looked from Tova's exhausted face to Yuna's, which was now set with a fierce, new determination, to Jay's, which was calculating, and to Hana's, which was purely compassionate. The Council had given humanity its verdict. They were flawed, volatile, fragile, unfit. But here, in this sterile bay, was a creature that had crossed the stars alone, not because humanity was strong, but because it had shown a moment of kindness. A kindness that, according to the galaxy's great logic, was probably just another flaw. Minsu stood up. His own feelings of rejection, of being caged, were still there. But they were now overshadowed by something else, a responsibility and a strange, rebellious hope. You are not safe yet, Minsu said, not just to Tova, but to everyone listening. But you are here, and we will not turn you away. The words felt like the first true thing he had said since leaving the council chambers. They were not a diplomatic statement. They were a promise, and it changed the air in the room. The solar system might be a cage, but they had just been given a key to see the locks from the outside. The air in the observation lounge was thin and cold, smelling of recycled oxygen and alien metals. Minsu stood perfectly still, his hands clasped behind the formal black fabric of his diplomatic suit. Through the vast, transparent wall, he watched the stars hang, sharp and unmoving, against the velvet black. Below the orbital spire, the planet Elysian Prime turned in majestic silence, its swirling blues and greens a cruel mockery of the paradise its rulers promised. He had come here seeking a place for humanity among those stars. In a few minutes, he would learn he had failed. Beside him, Yuna scrolled through a data slate, her brow slightly furrowed. She was younger than Minsu, her demeanor more direct, less practiced in the art of stillness. The Vorthan delegation arrived 12 minutes ago, she said quietly, her voice the only sound in the room. Their shuttle bypassed the public docks, went straight to the council's private hangar. That is their privilege as a senior member species, Minsu replied, his voice low and even. He did not turn from the view. They have had a seat here for 1,000 years. We have been knocking on the door for 50. The Lurian representatives were denied entry to the chamber today, Yuna added, a subtle edge in her tone. Security said their credentials were under review. Minsu finally looked at her. The Lurians were a minor species, gentle and empathic, always on the periphery. Their exclusion was a bad sign. It spoke of a council consolidating, of walls being raised, not doors opened. We proceed as planned, Yuna. We state our case. We show them our progress, our stability, our willingness to learn their laws. A soft chime echoed in the room. The door irised open, revealing a tall, slender being with gray, pebbled skin and large, wholly black eyes, a Jellerite, one of the council's administrative aides. Ambassador Kim, it intoned, its voice a whispery sigh. The council is ready for you. The walk to the grand chamber was a long one, through corridors that soared with impossible architecture, meant to impress and intimidate. Beings of all shapes and sizes moved past them. Some, like the insectoid cricks, clicked and chittered, their multiple limbs a blur. Others, like the crystalline sheen, glided silently, refracting light. Many did not look at the two humans. Some who did offered stares that were cool, dismissive, or simply curious about the latest biological novelty. Yuna kept pace, her data slate now held like a shield. Remember the key points, she murmured. Post-conflict unification era. The Mars and Ceres colonies are self-sustaining. Our FTL drive, while slower, is reliable and safe. We have ratified all 12 of the proposed galactic accords. Min-Su gave a single, shallow nod. He had recited these points 1,000 times. They were facts, clean and logical. But the tension in the air was not about logic. It was about something deeper, something he could feel but not name. The doors to the grand chamber were massive, carved from a single piece of iridescent stone from a forgotten world. As they parted, a wave of sound and scent washed over them, the low hum of conversation, the faint odor of ozone and strange spices. The chamber was a vast amphitheater. In tiers that rose to a domed ceiling depicting ancient cosmic battles, sat the representatives of the Galactic Council. At the center of the floor was a simple, circular podium. The Jellerite guided them to it. Min-Su stepped onto the platform, feeling the subtle hum of translation fields activating. Yuna stood a respectful step behind, and to his left dot at the highest tier, the Vorthan presider stood. The Vorthan were humanoid in basic shape, but taller with leathery, bronze-hued skin and cranial ridges that swept back from their severe faces. They valued logic, order, and strength above all. This one, Presider Vel, looked down, its expression unreadable. Ambassador Kim Min-Su of Sol 3, Vel's voice boomed, perfectly translated into Korean by the chamber systems. The Council has reviewed your petition for full membership and associated rights of colonization, trade, and diplomatic integration. Min-Su bowed slightly. Presider Vel, members of the Council, humanity thanks you for your consideration. We believe our shared future lies in cooperation, in adding our unique voice and spirit to this great alliance. A soft, discordant murmur rippled through some sections of the chamber. A furry KKH from the mid-tier leaned forward, its whiskers twitching. Your spirit is precisely the issue, Ambassador. Your emotional spectrum is volatile, unregulated. Your histories are cycles of conflict. How can such a species be trusted with the responsibilities of the stars? Min-Su had prepared for this. Our conflicts birthed our unity. Our emotions drive our art, our innovation, our compassion. We have learned to govern them, to direct their energy toward progress. A Sheen representative spoke next, its voice like chiming glass. Your biological metrics are concerning. Your lifespans are brief. Your physical forms are fragile, susceptible to disease, injury, and environmental shift. You are ephemeral. The cosmos is not kind to ephemeral things. Yuna's fingers tightened on her data slate. Min-Su kept his voice calm. Our fragility teaches us the value of every moment, of every life. It drives our medicine, our engineering. We do not seek to live forever, but to live well, and to ensure others may do the same. Presider Vel raised a 3-fingered hand, and the chamber fell silent. The Council's analysis is comprehensive, Ambassador. Your technological achievements are noted, but derivative. Your social stability is recent. The core assessment is this: Humanity, as a species, presents an unacceptable risk profile. Your biological and psychological instability make you incompatible with the long-term, stable frameworks of interstellar society. The words hung in the air, cold and absolute. Min-Su felt a hollow opening in his chest. Incompatible. An unacceptable risk. They were not just being denied. They were being diagnosed, pathologized. The petition for membership is denied, Vell continued, its tone final. Humanity will remain a pre-integrated, quarantined species, confined to its native star system. Any attempts at extrasolar colonization or unauthorized contact with member species will be met with sanction. Your existing outposts on Mars and the asteroid belt will be permitted, but monitored. This decision is unanimous. Unanimous. The word was a physical blow. Min-Su had expected resistance, debate, perhaps a conditional status. Not this total, clean, surgical excision from the future. He found his voice, though it felt alien to him. Presider. This is a mistake. You judge us by what we were, not by what we are, or what we could be together. We judge by what is measurable, Vell replied, utterly unmoved. The session is concluded. The translation field died. The chamber's ambient noise returned, now sounding like indifferent chatter. The Gellerite aide was suddenly at Min-Su's elbow, gesturing toward a side exit. The dismissal was total dot. The walk back through the gleaming corridors was a blur. Min-Su moved automatically, his diplomatic training the only thing holding him upright. Yuna was silent beside him, her face pale, her eyes fixed ahead, burning with a mixture of shock and anger. They took a less traveled corridor toward the diplomatic shuttle bay, a route meant for staff and service. The grandeur gave way to functional metal and dimmer light. The silence between them was heavy, suffocating dot. It was then they heard the sounds, a sharp, clicking hiss and a softer, distressed warble. Around a bend in the corridor, a scene unfolded. A large Crix, its carapace gleaming under the lights, had a smaller being cornered against a storage locker. The smaller one was a Lurian, its slender form covered in fine, fawn-colored fur, its large, liquid dark eyes wide with fear. The Crix was jabbing a clawed limb at it, clicking angrily. Useless empathic leakage. Your kind clouds the station with emotional static. Should be ejected into the void? The Crix's words were translated by Min-Su's own earpiece, which was still active. The Lurian flinched, trying to make itself smaller, uttering soft, pleading sounds that didn't translate. Min-Su stopped. Every lesson, every diplomatic protocol, screamed at him to walk on. The Council had just declared his species a problem. Involving himself in an internal matter between two alien species would be catastrophic folly, but he saw the fear in the Lurian's eyes. It was a simple, pure, and utterly recognizable terror. It was not the cold dismissal of the Council. It was the fear of a creature being hurt dot before he could think. Before Yuna could grab his arm to stop him, Min-Su took 3 low strides forward. He placed himself between the Crix and the Lurian, not aggressively, but squarely. The corridor seems congested, Min-Su said, his voice deliberately calm, projecting a neutrality he did not feel. Perhaps the matter can be resolved elsewhere. The Crix swiveled its angular head toward him, its compound eyes glinting. It seemed to size him up, this fragile, soft-skinned thing that had just been cast out by its betters. A contemptuous click emanated from its thorax. For a long, tense moment, Min-Su thought it might turn its aggression on him. Then, with a final, dismissive hiss, the Crix turned and clattered away down the corridor, its claws scraping on the metal floor. Min-Su let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He turned to the Lurian, who was trembling, its large eyes fixed on him with an intensity that was almost physical. He raised his empty hands, palms out, in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "Are you injured?" The Lurian did not speak. It simply stared, as if memorizing his face. Then it gave a small, shuddering nod, a gesture so human-like it was startling.